I'm Dana Moriello, and you're listening to This Is a Thing, the podcast where I interview entrepreneurs who started unusual businesses and found success on their own terms. We talk about how they got their wild ideas, how they decided to act on them, and how those ideas have grown. Today, we're talking to David Barnett, co-founder of Noble Signs. Noble Signs is a design studio based in New York City that specializes in hand-painted and neon signs. Picture the gorgeous storefronts of Katz Deli or Russ and Daughters in New York City, and you get the idea. I have photos in the show notes that you can check out. I wanted to talk to David because he's built a successful business that on some level is counterintuitive. He practices a craft that very few people have expertise in today. It's expensive and it's labor intensive. He's competing against quick and cheap vinyl signage that you can get at Kinko's. But it's exactly this commitment to craft that has made him so successful. Enjoy the conversation. I just want to start here because this is an audio medium and what you do is so visual. I would just love to start. If you could describe for us, what are handmade signs and what's an example of a really awesome handmade sign that you think really epitomizes the art form?
I think for us, we look at craft signage mostly looking to like the mid-century era and really just like the pre-digital era when, things had to be done with a certain level of skill that you just don't really see in the trade as much anymore. I think the sign industry in particular is one of those fields that if you look back 30 maybe, but definitely 50, 75 years, like you're talking about a field that was full of incredibly skilled artisans, craftspeople, and they were all working together. There were what you'd call now designers. I don't know if they called themselves that back then, but designers, artists, fabricators, craftspeople, and working together in these sign shops to make these things that were so spectacular. It's like you could only imagine them, how they were made today. And I think a lot of that comes back to this like idea of unseen effort. It's like when you're making something by hand and you're tapping into the 10,000 hours that you put in to learn how to bend neon or how to carve a wood sign or how to do gold leaf gilding or painting letters freehand, off the brush. The product obviously carries a bit of yourself into it in a way that when you just create it digitally and hit print is just absent. Those amazing signs that like just make your heart skip a beat when you see them. Unfortunately, there's been a pretty significant bleeding of some of the greatest signs. Like I would have said Carnegie Deli or something like that, which is no longer around, but we still have a lot of great remaining mid-century spectacular signs. The easiest one I think to point to is if you go to Houston Street and you can see Katz's Deli and Russ and Daughter right there, and those signs are just amazing and the storefronts are amazing, and it's great that they're preserving them. And but there's still amazing signs all over New York City. Almost like when you go outer borough, you maybe see more of it because those neighborhoods are a little more, time moves a little slower, like the further away you get from Manhattan.
So let's focus it on you and your journey now with that foundation in place. Before starting Noble Signs, you were an art director at Def Jam Records. You were designing posters, record covers, working with some pretty big names. Sounds like a cool job. I'm curious if you were to go. It was. So tell me, if you were to go back mentally to that part of your life, was this the dream job for you, or was this a step on a path to get somewhere else? How were you thinking about that job at that time?
That was my dream job. I'm a huge music fan, but was never really a talented musician, and I always was sort of music adjacent. I mean, I was in bands, but I think often like what I was the most excited about was like making the flyers for the shows or designing the cover for the CD or something like that. I didn't study design in college. I did some very classic liberal arts I knew going into college that I probably wanted to do art and design. It was something I was really passionate about and interested all through middle school, high school, growing up, and I grew up in a family surrounded by that. My dad worked in the printing industry in Manhattan, so I grew up around printing presses, and he worked in a really amazing press that had that, manufacturing, production, design, all in one building, like 8 floors, beautiful pre-war building in Chelsea. But yeah, I always knew that I kind of wanted to end up in either publishing, or the dream would be, working for a record label, doing art doing art direction, album covers, posters. And going into college, I had gotten a little disillusioned with art education at the time and ended up actually majoring in religious studies, East Asian studies. So it was very classic liberal arts, learning something that isn't necessarily going to have anything to do with what you do in your life, but it teaches you, gives you inspiration. It teaches you how to think about things in a different way. And I'm really glad I did that. But I did come out of college kind of being like, okay, like I want to do art and design, and I don't have a real path to do it because I didn't study it. Kind of had a tumultuous few years around graduation because I graduated college in 2008. Perfect timing for the recession to hit. Both me and my business partner, we went to college together, we both thought we wanted to work in publishing. So our college had an internship, like they would pay you a small stipends to get an internship between your junior and senior year. So we both got internships at different publishing companies in New York. And I kind of came in there being like, I'll do whatever you guys want. It was this awesome press called Soft Skull in Dumbo. And they were like, oh, do you want to like do copy editing? Do you want to review submissions? Do you want to try a book layout? I was like, oh yeah, a book layout. That sounds cool. And I kind of just taught myself how to use InDesign and laid out a book, and then they ended up having me lay out a few more, and then by the end of the summer they'd given me a few book covers to work on. So I went into my senior year of college. I was actually studying abroad in Japan, but I had a part-time job already doing book covers and book layouts for this press, and I was like, this is awesome. I have like a job lined up. And then the recession hit, the publishing company got absorbed by a bigger company. I lost that job, and I was kind of kicking around trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I interned briefly with an artist named Mirko Ilic. He's an amazing designer, illustrator who was actually worked in the same building as Milton Glaser. He was sort of like Milton's, one of his like mentees. And I worked there for a few months. He kind of gave me this bug of like digging deeper on the poster art and working in music, because that he had done a lot of amazing work in the music industry that he built his career on. So while I was doing that, at the same time, me and my buddy started a small business just designing and screen printing posters for local DIY shows in Brooklyn. You know, I have a lot of friends who play music, and I was a big music. Through those connections, we had the ability to kind of pitch people on this idea like, hey, you're throwing this show, let us make a poster and we'll come set up a table and we'll screen print like 50 posters and we'll come try to sell posters. It wasn't like a super sustainable, profitable business model, but it was something that kind of got me involved in the arts and connecting with other creatives and collaboration, which has always just been something that really I thrive on as a creative. So, you know, we were screen printing posters in my roommate's bedroom and it was something we did for maybe a couple years. Kind of the internship with Mirko ended and I wasn't really qualified to actually get a job at a design studio because I had no experience and I didn't have a degree in it or really the confidence, I think, to go in and try to apply for those jobs. And I was just kicking around part-time jobs, just trying to figure it out. And then one day I got a call from a promoter who I'd worked with on some posters for some like DIY shows he had done. And he said, hey, I'm working with this guy, Damon Dash. Like he's this like hip hop legend and he's starting this new record label where he's trying to fuse like hip hop and like indie and, you know, all the stuff that's going on in New York right now and bring all these people together. It's kind of like an art collective record label. And I showed him your posters and he wants to give you a job. Like you should come by. So I came by and it was a pretty wild scene. Like I had a job interview in front of like 30 people. It was just the weirdest thing. And they offered me a job and it was basically my dream come true. They hired me primarily to do exactly what I wanted to do, which was design the posters and album covers for all the stuff that they were doing. But I kind of quickly got my fingers in a lot of things. I ended up spearheading us doing like a magazine. I got involved with merchandise and we ended up actually setting up a screen printing studio in the basement of the label of the building that we were in Tribeca. And we were doing kind of the same thing I'd been doing, like printing posters and eventually printing a lot of t-shirts. And at the same time, I was getting to do art direction for some really exciting releases that we were working on, and getting to work with amazing artists, Currency, Erykah Badu, Cameron, Jim Jones, Raekwon. So it was amazing. I remember having a conversation with my friend Mac, who is now my business partner, and after I did an album cover called Pilot Talk that it really took off and people responded really positively. So it just happened to be a great record, and it made it on all the year-end best lists. And the album cover was unusual because it was inspired by the work that I loved, like psychedelic album artwork from the 60s and 70s. And it was very unusual in the world of hip hop to have an album cover like that. It didn't have the artist's face on it anywhere. It was just like purely illustration driven, and lettering driven. And yeah, it became like a hip hop classic. And I was 23, and I remember saying to my friend at the time, like, have I peaked? Like, is this it? Where do I go from here? I didn't expect that to happen. I thought that was something I'd have to work years and years to get to. So it was a very cool thing that happened early, but I guess the double-edged sword of that was all of a sudden I felt like I've already achieved. That was like my career goal, to design a classic album cover, and here I am and I've done it. And now what's next? Where do I go from here? That was 2010. And then it wasn't long after that Instagram and Spotify came out, and the whole thrust of the music industry changed even more than it had already. Physical media was already sort of on the way out when I started working there in 2009, but it was still important enough that like they hired me to have my primary job be designing album covers. By 2012, I'd say it was like, oh, well, like, are we even going to do this one physical? It might just be digital only. And like, we were really pivoting more towards doing merchandise, because that is very much where like the revenue from music industry was headed, touring and to merchandise over like physical album sales. And, there's also just like music industry it's a young person's game, because everyone wants to do it. So there's always somebody who's like waiting to just do your job for free for the cool points, So I think the writing was kind of on the wall that it probably was something that I was going to transition out of. And around that same time, 2010, being young and living in Brooklyn, we had many, many friends working in bars and restaurants. And a friend of ours had been a bartender and had the opportunity to buy in as like a junior partner on a new bar that his boss was opening. And he said, you should reach out to my friend David to have him do the branding, to do the logo for the bar and to design some stuff for the bar. And you should also reach out to my other friend Mac to have him build a sign. Me and Mac have a long history. We met our freshman year of college. His dad's a fine furniture maker, so he grew up also in like a production house where he was helping his dad make things from a young age. From like the very beginning, our friendship was very much about projects and collaborations and things we could do together. Our freshman year at college, we started a student group called Press. The goal of the group was to have like a student-run publishing company that would publish student work, whether it was like a novella or a short story collection or a comic book or a photo book, and to give people a platform to release full-length work as like visual releases and then give it out for free. It was a really fun, like just early training wheels experience to learn how to put a project together. So when our friends reached out to us about doing this project for the bar, we immediately were just like, oh, we should just collaborate on this, and we should try to kind of sell them on the idea of it being one project that we do together, the design and the signage and anything else we can do for them. I think Mac maybe built some planters for them. He's a really talented woodworker, so there's a lot of ways you can use his skill set when you're opening a bar or a restaurant. And it was just like a one-off thing. It was called the Fulton Grand. I think maybe it was like a year after that, the bar had done well and they were like, we're going to open another bar. Let's do the same thing. And then they opened another one. And that was sort of happening in the background while I was working at the label. And at some point, we kind of both were just getting more excited about the work we were doing for this like moonlighting, making signage and design for bars and restaurants. We just said, hey, let's try to do this. Let's try to do this full time and see if we can really make a go of it. So in 2013, we both quit our jobs.
Well, let me drill into that decision in particular, because that seems like such a huge turning point. How many projects did you have at that time? What was the proof and validation that you were looking at to make you confident, if there was at all, that this is the time to quit my job?
Some of it was just that, like I said, the writing was sort of on the wall for me at my job, that it wasn't something I really wanted to keep doing. I worked there for 5 years. In the end, it was a great experience. But the direction of the industry was just not going the way I wanted. And the company I was at, I think, was just pivoting away from what I really wanted to be doing. And I thought about applying for another job within the music industry. But to be honest, I always worked better as my own boss, I think. I can sometimes have butt up against authority in a way that maybe makes me less employable than the average person. So I think it was a natural idea to just try to start my own thing, and having Mac as a partner definitely gave me the confidence to do it, because he's just a really solid person and he always brings a certain level of thoughtfulness and level-headedness to every project. If I didn't have Mac as a partner, I don't think I ever would have started my own company at that stage of my life, by myself at least. We made our first sign in 2010 and we didn't come up with the name Noble Signs until 2013. And that's when we incorporated the business. And that's when we, I think, also both left our jobs.
And how many projects had you done together at that time by 2013?
Maybe like 6, 7. It wasn't like a tremendous amount, but they were getting bigger. And I think that was for us, was like, how do we sell this idea of a full service company? And we saw that need. People were opening bars, restaurants, shops, and they were having to go to so many different people. We need a graphic designer, and we need someone who's going to help us design the interior, and we need an architect, and we need a sign maker, and we need a consultant for this and a consultant for that. We just thought, could we just cast a really big net and try to like offer a ton of services that we maybe aren't even qualified to do, but let's just say we know how to do them and then we'll figure it out as we go along. That's like the New Yorker in me, just like maybe faking it till I made it.
Well, let's talk about clients for a second, because you've had these really cool small business clients. And on one hand, there's just such a alignment of values with these small businesses. They're cool. They're awesome case studies. They also, on the other hand, have smaller budgets and they go out of business more frequently. How did you think about that choice of client?
We have a pretty unusual approach to the way we run our business, because obviously we are entrepreneurs and we are always thinking about our bottom line. But at the same time, I don't think we make decisions based on what is the most profitable. We make decisions based on what we want to do, and then make sure that we can at least make enough profit to make it worth our time. And I think that's been basically the driving ethos behind the company since the beginning. We take projects that excite us, and we put as much of our time and our energy and our creativity into them as we can if we believe in them. The reason that people aren't bending neon and painting signs is because it's not as profitable as just hitting print and doing a vinyl. Even if you can sell a hand-painted sign for twice the cost of a vinyl sign, it takes you 4 times as long. So it's still not going to be as profitable. But I think for us, that was core to what we were trying to do, that craft matters. And maybe if all we were trying to do was make a successful sign company, quote unquote, I think we would have pursued a very different path, because you could certainly make a lot more money faster just by having all of the latest equipment and competing at the level that the industry currently exists on. Instead, we kind of tried to come in and disrupt it and say, look, there's a real value in this stuff that's been forgotten.
That was David Barnett talking about his journey building Noble Signs. Here's what I'm taking away from David's story. First, the power of a side project. While David worked a full-time job, he was also running a side project, screen printing t-shirts and posters at music venues. He designed brands and signage for friends' bars. He was doing things that he loved and that were fun without a master plan about where they might lead or what might happen next. It was because he was doing these things and people saw his work that he got new opportunities and that opened new doors. I've heard other guests describe this in another way. Build your portfolio with the work that you want to do. Second, the power of saying yes. David's journey was full of pivotal moments where he decided to say yes. Damon Dash wants to hire him as an artistic director? Yes. A friend wants him to design a logo for the bar? Yes. A client's interested in a new form of design service that his company doesn't offer yet? Yes, yes, yes. My last guest described this as walk through every open door. Third, the power of standing for something. This one's interesting because this principle is sort of the check and balance against the last one. David and Max started this business with a very strong sense of their values. And it was because they stood for something that they attracted talent and they attracted clients and they were able to differentiate. Most importantly, that's what allowed them to achieve success on their own terms. This is Dana Moriello, and I can't wait to see you next week on This Is a Thing.